Good morning. Welcome to All Things Green. My name is Carol. I work at the Sun Prairie Jung's location, and I am very happy to be here with you today. I just want to start out by saying that 75% of all of our food crops require benefit from pollination. Bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds are probably the most well-known pollinators, but there are also many more species of insects, birds, bats, and other mammals. But sadly, pollinators are disappearing at alarming rates due to diseases, habitat loss, and pesticide use. Each of us can help pollinators in three important ways. We can totally eliminate or start reducing our pesticide use. They kill all insects, even the good ones, and this has a huge effect on our world. Provide a water source for the pollinators, such as a bird bath or a small water feature. Even taking a dish of sand and adding water to it and setting it on the ground will provide pollinators with the water and the minerals that they need to stay healthy. And then we need to add to our yards and gardens flowering plants that have rich nectar that will attract the pollinators. Today, I want to talk to you about some of the amazing pollinator plants that you can add to your existing garden or the garden that you may like to create. Since perennials have specific flowering times, you will want to be sure that you have blooming flowers throughout the growing season, from spring all the way into fall. This way, pollinators will always have a consistent nectar source. The first flower that I want to talk to you about is an interesting flower. It is called the passflower, or Pulsatilla vulgaris. It's an early spring blooming perennial that has purple blue shaped bell flowers. These little flowers are furry on the outside and they're satiny smooth on the inside. The leaves also have a hairy texture. As the flower starts to mature, it will nod, and then those flowers will be replaced by a plume-like seed head. These plants mainly attract bumblebees who feed on its rich nectar. The zone 4 to 8 plant is a full sun plant and is actually a member of the buttercup family. It stands only 10 to 12 inches high. They like alkaline soil and they grow well in rock gardens, and because of their size, they make really nice border plants. An interesting fact about the passflower is that the American Indians were the first to discover the medical uses of the flower. They would cut the plant off at the root and dry it and use it in a whole array of herbal remedies, including medicine to calm and soothe the nervous system. It's also used by herbologists in the treatment of coughs and colds. And I'm gonna put this one back and grab the next early spring pollinator plant. This is Virginia bluebells, or Mertensia virginica. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is a spring perennial that will bring spectacular color and much needed nectar for spring pollinators. Bumblebees are often seen visiting the flowers, but are not common pollinators since the flower position requires the bee to hover over the flower. Butterflies are the more common pollinator since these insects can grasp onto the edges of the flower petals as they pollinate each of the individual flowers. These plants thrive in moist soil, and they like shade, parched shade, in zones 3 to 8. They grow about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. The flowers start out really pretty as pinkish buds and then transition into blue in the spring. Bluebells complete the entire growth cycle by the end of spring. And by summer, like right now, this plant goes dormant. And that's why this plant looks the way it does. It's gone back into dormancy. An interesting fact about bluebells are they are poisonous, and they contain about 15 biologically active compounds to defend themselves from animals and insect pests. Scientists are now researching this chemical to find out if it's possible that it could help treat cancer one day. Okay, we'll move on to some of the early summer blooming plants. We'll start out with this particular one. This is Baptisia australis. Sometimes it's referred to as false indigo. It's a member of the pea family and is an early summer perennial. This perennial has clusters of deep blue flowers that have really attractive blue-green leaves. Both bees and hummingbirds are attracted to the pea-like flowers, reaching deep inside to access the rich nectar. It grows into a large 3-foot to 5-foot bush. It's hardy in zones 3 through 5, and it likes full to part sun. Usually blooms in June. An interesting fact about the Baptisia is that early Americans noticed that when you pick the flowers off, when the sap came into contact with the air, the sap would turn blue. So they use this plant to make blue dye, which is how this plant also got its name, false indigo. So there's that. And this next plant is one of my favorite plants. This plant is also going back into dormancy, but for some reason in my garden, I have one blooming right now. And I think it might be out of whack with what it's supposed to be doing, because it was a perennial that I bought here at Jung's and planted in the spring. And so now it is just blooming, but this is what the blooms look like. These are long-lived, cool season perennial plants that begin blooming in the early summer. Hummingbirds, butterflies, bumblebees, and a whole host of bees, including mason bees, miner bees, carpenter bees, all flock to this perennial. It comes in a variety of colors, including blue, purple, pink, red, yellow, and white. But the hardiest of all the lupine are the blue, the wild blue lupine. It tolerates a variety of soil types, including dry, sandy soil, as well as moist, well-drained loams. They do not like to have wet feet, so never plant this particular perennial where there is standing water. As a legume, this lupine plant will contribute nitrogen back into the soil. It's hardy in zone 3 to 7. It reaches a height of anywhere from 18 to 36 inches and will spread about 12 to 36 inches. Blooms in June and prefers sun, but also will tolerate some light shade. Interesting fact about the lupine is that they grow in all areas of the world except for the polar regions. And this is interesting. The seeds are traditionally eaten as a pickled snack food in the Mediterranean and the Latin American countries. That was actually something I did not know about the lupine. Okay, according to the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the eastern United States monarch population has decreased by more than 80% in the last 20 years. That's a rather startling statistic. Underlying causes of this decline is the scarcity of milkweed and the loss of habitat to grow. Therefore, it's important to include milkweed in our yards and in our gardens. Plant I want to show you now is called Asclepias incarnata, or the Soulmate swamp milkweed. It attracts and nourishes hummingbirds, moths, butterflies, and bees in the mid to late summer. Last summer, well, I have this plant in my garden, and last summer I actually had a hummingbird moth that came to visit it, and that was quite a spectacular little moth to observe. Monarchs especially depend on the essential milkweed as a food source. They lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves, and after hatching, the larvae or the caterpillars consume the foliage, and that the leaves are high in a very toxic chemical that has a very unappetizing taste to its predators. This poison can actually interfere with the heart functions of vertebrates, but the toxins actually protect caterpillars and adult butterflies from other predators, such as birds. These plants grow about 36 to 42 inches tall. They prefer full sun. They have cherry pink flower clusters that emit a sweet vanilla scent. And when you're working with this plant, you might want to keep in mind that the sap is poisonous to pets and other animals. You may even want to protect your hands by wearing gloves when you're working with it. Also, in the same family as the swamp milkweed is the Asclepias tuberosa. This particular one is the yellow butterflyweed. Both of these plants are, I should add, are deer and rabbit resistant, and they're also very, very slow to emerge in the spring. You may reach a point where you're waiting for them and you're wondering if they're even still alive, but they're coming. They're just slow at breaking through the ground like I said, in the spring. Unlike the Soulmate swamp milkweed, the yellow butterflyweed does not have a poisonous milky sap. The yellow flowers produce copious amounts of nectar. They attract the hummingbirds, the butterflies, bees, and other helpful insects. This plant is a lot shorter. It only grows about 1.5 to 3 feet tall and wide. It prefers full sun and grows in zones 3 to 9. Okay. I got another plant here to show you. This is called the Rattlesnake Master. I would love to pronounce the botanical name for you, but I'm challenged with that. I think, I'll give it a try. It's Eryngium eucafolium. Many gardeners pass by this plant in the garden center because it looks like a thistle. But it's an amazing, amazing plant. In the garden, this Rattlesnake Master is another one of those favorite flowers of monarchs. They visit their flower heads for nectars. Now, this is not a flower head from it, but it looks a little bit like this one. This is actually from a different kind of plant, but has a look like that. One of those flower stalks can have anywhere from 10 to 40 flower heads, with each flower averaging over 100 individual little tiny flowers. Caterpillars of the swallowtail butterfly feed on the leaves, and major pollinators include a diversity of bees and wasps and flies. It's hardy in zone 3 to 9. It can grow anywhere from 2 to 5 feet tall and spreads about 1 to 2 feet. It thrives in bright sunlight. Companion plants for this particular guy would include the prairie grasses and coneflowers, of course, and then sea holly. And those the coneflowers and sea holly are also pollinator-loving plants, but it would just really set off the Rattlesnake Master to be growing with those particular perennials. The next plant I want to show you is the Chelone, or Turtlehead. This specific one is the Hot Lips. And this is a late summer blooming perennial that has rosy pink flowers that look actually like a turtle's head, except it's pink. And it looks like, when you look at the bloom, it looks like the mouth of the turtle is open. This plant entices bumblebees and honeybees. It's amazing to watch this. It's worth standing around and watching, because a bee will literally dive head first into the hooded flowers, squirming and wiggling to reach the nectar deep inside the flower. And the flower heads are just large enough to allow the entrance of the bee with no turnaround space available. When you walk by the plant, you can often hear bees buzzing from inside the flowers. And that may be because they are expressing a feeling of claustrophobia. They have such a little space inside, but it's well worth the venture, because these particular plants have very rich nectar inside of them. This plant is actually a native of the Appalachian Mountain area. They grow to be 2 to 3 feet tall and spread about 18 to 24 inches. It prefers dappled sunlight. It needs protection from hot afternoon sun. And then we'll pull out Mr. Joe Pyeweed here. This is actually baby Joe Pyeweed. This perennial has gorgeous, in fact, you can see on the top of the plant that it's starting to form its flower heads. It has gorgeous purple blooms that add a sweet fragrance to the late summer garden. It supplies butterflies, hummingbirds, bees with the vital nectar that they need this late in the season. Seed heads will last through winter and will provide food for birds when food is scarce. Baby Joe Pyeweed thrives in zones 4 through 8. It grows to be 2 to 3 feet tall, and it's both deer and rabbit resistant, which is always good news. There is a Joe Pyeweed for every size garden. This baby Joe, as I said, grows to be 2 to 3 feet tall. Then there's another variety called Little Joe, and that grows to be 3 to 5 feet tall. And then there's the regular Joe Pyeweed that's very tall. It grows to be 5 to 7 feet tall. So you can pick the one that's right for your garden. A very interesting fact about this plant is that, according to legend, Joe Pye was a colonial New England herb doctor. But some people say, no, he was a Native American. He was skillful at making potions from a variety of wild plants to treat a variety of ailments. And supposedly he gained fame, and his name was associated with this plant because he used a Joe Pyeweed to stop a typhus epidemic. Okay, and now we're getting into the fall pollinators. When other flowering perennials are starting to slow down and fade, it is very, very important to provide migratory and hibernating pollinators with energizing and nourishing nectar. And for this reason, the fall flowering plants are very, very critical. The sky is really little right now, and his little buds weren't clipped back to promote fall growth, so they're starting to grow now. This is the purple dome aster. It's a New England aster, and it is literally a pollen hotspot for native bees, flies, butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds to sip nectar. Beekeepers report that when bees are producing honey in the hive from this particular aster flower, there is actually an aroma of a fresh brownie scent in the air. These zone 3 to 8 asters grow to be about 1.5 to 2 feet tall. They prefer full sun, partial shade. They too are rabbit and deer resistant. An interesting fact about the purple dome aster is that the Lakota Indians used to burn the dried aster in their sweat lodges, and they actually used the root of the plant to treat headaches and nosebleeds. Okay, the next plant here is not in its full glory, not yet. This is Solidago rugosa, or fireworks. It's a 3 foot to 4 foot tall perennial that has arching little spikes, and when this plant matures, these spikes will be just weeping off the branches. The spikes radiate with light yellow flowers like fireworks in September. It attracts native honeybees, butterflies, and other beneficial insects. And songbirds will come along after the plants go to seed and eat the seeds. This plant is actually a member of the goldenrod family and prefers sun to partial shade. An interesting fact about the Solidago rugosa is that these plants are often blamed falsely for causing hay fever, but the symptoms are actually caused by ragweed, which is in bloom at the same time. The pollen from this plant is too heavy to become airborne. So yeah, the plant's gotten kind of a bad rap, but it is a beauty. It's a perfect garden complement to the purple asters, because the purple asters will be just a little bit shorter than this, and it actually looks like there would be fireworks, flowers over, yellow flowers over the purple asters. So these two would be perfect garden complements. Another really nice plant in the same family of the Solidago fireworks is the little lemon. And this guy gets to be only 10 to 18 inches tall. So if this is too big for you, you might consider the little lemon. It doesn't have the spikes that this one does, but it gets masses of beautiful yellow flowers in the fall. So, yeah. So it was a pleasure talking with you today. It was difficult limiting myself to just a few pollinators, as there are so many different varieties of perennials at the Jung Garden Centers. And these plants host a United Nations of pollinators throughout the whole growing season. I invite you to come back and check out other fascinating perennials, shrubs, and trees that we have available in our gardens. We look forward very much to seeing you. Thank you.